Hey, bag ladies and bag dudes. I'm Sarah Lawson from So Sweetness. This is my friend Tamara, and
Hi,
you're
everybody.
watching the book club discussion for books number 3 and 4. All right, thank you so much for joining us. It's our first live show in a few weeks, and so I'm so happy to be here with my friend Tamara, and I love the book club discussions. This week, though, we have both books number 3 and number 4 to be discussed, so we're actually going to jump right in. And at the end of the show, I'm going to be showing the free project that I have to go along with both of these books. So excited to show that to you at the end of the show. So we're going to start off with book number 3, which was Mademoiselle Chanel by C.W. Gortner. And we're just going to jump right in with the questions. You're welcome, of course, as always, to answer the questions in the comments, either on Facebook or YouTube. And if you have a question for us, of course, you can post that in the comments. And Danny's also going to be posting some of your replies to our book club discussions on the screen as we go along. So we're going to start off with the first question, which was, when Coco was at Abazine, she said, "Fear had become my enemy because it might take root inside me and never leave." How did she use fear to motivate her? So I thought that throughout her career, I think she used a healthy dose of fear to motivate innovation, such as the new shops, clothing, the fragrance. And I think in a way I sort of do the same thing. I don't mean that I have fear hovering over my head all the time, but I think in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking of like a small bit of pressure, and I feel like in a way it keeps me going.
Motivates you to keep going.
Right, thinking of new things. Sometimes, obviously, I'm thinking of way more, I don't want to say crazy ideas, but way more fun things than I can actually accomplish in a reasonable amount of time. But I guess that's kind of a good problem to have.
Yeah, and I agreed. I had fear seemed to give her ambition and motivation to be successful. So pretty much as we agreed on that one.
The next question is, what do you think of Coco and Bosons' relationship at the beginning of the book and then later on when they are no longer together?
I had my answer would be, I guess it's known and accepted in France that Frenchmen have mistresses. And I think it was probably a way out for Coco. She was 23 and pretty much going nowhere. He helped her kind of introduce her to luxury and elegance with his lifestyle, and encouraged her to start with her hats, which is what started her business. And he seemed angry when she didn't love him the same way when she fell in love with Boy. But even with time, he continued to help her be successful when he let her use his flat for his apartment. And then when she started making the jersey fabric, he contacted his family with the textiles and helped her.
Yeah, so that was a great
with
connection.
that. So I think he cared about her and he wanted her to be successful. So he did that.
Yeah, I said something similar. I thought that she seemed like a strong person, so I thought it was interesting that she became his mistress when she didn't seem attracted to him, or at least that's what I took from the book. At least not as attracted as she was to Boy. But I think sometimes things happen that are meant to be, because she would not have had the idle time or the resources to start her hat business if she was not
And
his
that's
mistress.
what got everything rolling.
Right. And then even when they were not together, like you said, he was still a strong support system to her, especially when Boy was killed. And I think that probably speaks to her magnetism as a person, that a former lover would still be there for her. So the next question was, Coco reflects that during her relationship with Boy, yes, I was happy. It was not a comfortable feeling for me. Why does happiness, especially domestic or romantic happiness, unsettle her? Does she ever get comfortable with happiness? So I think that her experience growing up showed her a lot of difficulty and sadness, so it was just easier not to love or to become attached. And I think she could have become comfortable with Boy if he had not gotten married. I think her history of romantic relationships repeatedly sent her back into the arms of her work, so to speak.
Yep, I agreed. It seemed her life as a young girl was full of disappointments, with her father leaving after her mother died, growing up in the convent. And I kind of had the underlying theme of she had all these ideas and she was taught at the convent to expect very little regarding happiness. Just be grateful for what you have and don't expect more. I think she was afraid to be happy that it would be taken away from her again, like when her father left. She seemed to be a little more accepting of being happy toward the end of her life, and who wouldn't be with how successful she
Right,
was,
yeah,
I
that's
guess.
true. What is Coco's relationship with her siblings and Aunt Adrian?
She seemed close with her sisters. It was kind of sad when she lost contact with her brothers, and then to find out later that they didn't go off and have someone to take care of them, but they were kind of sold to be farmhands, basically. But it didn't seem like she worked very hard to find them or to stay in touch with them, so maybe she wasn't as close with them. I think she was much closer to her sisters. As far as Adrian, she was close in age, and I think she really counted on her with her business, but there were a few references where Adrian reminded her of her father, and she still had bitter, unsettled feelings
Yeah, that makes
with
sense.
with her father.
I thought she had taken on a caregiver role as far as her family. I think I recalled that she paid for her nephew to go to
Julia's son.
a really fancy school, and but I felt like there was in some aspects a lack of emotional attachment. Maybe kind of what you mentioned before.
I think she was afraid. Don't get too close and I won't get hurt.
Right,
Don't
right.
get too attached because they might leave. That's
Right.
kind of how I felt.
Right, because
reading
they've
it.
done, people have left in the past, and that was just part of what happened, yeah. The next question is, Coco says to herself, "It appeared I did not work at all, when in truth I worked harder than ever to maintain the illusion that success was effortless." What do you think about this in regards to the book, and do you think working women today try to maintain the same illusion? So I think that even though she had employees, Coco wore a lot of hats for her business, and this was the reason why her business was so successful. And I think if you kind of look at work in regards to women today, I think women's work is sort of sad in a way because so many of the household tasks are almost invisible. So the household tasks, they get done often like clockwork.
What did you do all day?
Right, seemingly behind the scenes, so like nobody sees these things getting done, but somehow they get done. The dishes, the laundry,
Magic.
it's magic, right?
Mom magic.
And so I think a woman who works a job away from the home also seems to have the expectation, either from herself or from society, to work a job as well as the upkeep of the house and family, which is a full-time job in and of itself.
Yep, I think we both agreed on that one. I had Coco threw herself into her work, especially when she was going through difficult times. I thought it was amazing what she accomplished during that time. Fast forwarding to today, I think we've come a long way regarding women being successful in business, but now I think it's even harder because the last maybe 20, 30, 40 years, most women that have families have to learn how to balance working, take care of their homes, their families, their marriages, and their jobs. And I was a working mom. It's not an easy thing. Being a stay-at-home mom, that's not easy either.
Right.
So it's creating that balance.
Yeah, that's a good point, balance. Vogue wrote that Chanel's little black dress will become standard for the masses, much like Ford's motor cars. How many little black dresses do you own? Let us know in the comments if you know the number. And why has that particular garment become such an enduring classic? Why is it the quintessential Chanel garment?
I thought it was amazing because she took something that was worn at funerals and for mourning into
I didn't think of that, but
something
it's true.
elegant and classic that any woman in any age in her life, from being a teenager to being someone in their 80s, had that quintessential one item. It was simple, it was elegant, especially when you add like a string of pearls the way she did. Put your hair up, wear some nice shoes, and everybody knows it's like an icon. And even today, almost 100 years later, it's still
crazy.
considered. I have two. I have one that's longer and one that's shorter, and I'll probably never get rid of either one of them. And they're old.
I think I own 3 or 4 black dresses, and actually my grandma, we call her Amma, but Amma gave me a black dress that she wore with a fabric belt, so it was like
You should have brought it down.
I should have brought it out, but the belt was made with the same fabric as the dress, and it's still something that I would wear, even though she got it so long ago. And I think a black dress is a neutral silhouette that is always in style no matter the decade. And it can be dressed up or down with the use of accessories, like kind of how you mentioned with the pearls. So very interesting.
And it makes us look thinner, so
Yeah,
that's always
that's
a
true.
good thing.
That's true. What did you think about Coco's fragrance and her business dealings with the Wertheimers? So I was absolutely fascinated to read in the book that the fragrance
too.
came from the same scent saved from Russian royalty. I thought that was a great backstory. And then I thought she made a poor business decision that reminds me of stories that I've heard about singers or musicians when they sign a record contract.
Sign here and
Right, where they're making very little money. You think, they're this world-renowned musician, or in her case, designer. They must be really raking it in, and they're just, they have very little money to live on, which I think you would be surprised to hear. But I think it was just a poor business decision at the time.
well, and she was young, and back in the 1920s and 30s, women didn't have businesses and lawyers to look at contracts. I mean, even like you said with the music industry, even in the 70s and 80s, that kind of stuff was happening. I think they were very smart businessmen. They took advantage of her. I think at the beginning she only got 10%. And I do a lot of research with my job, so I found this fascinating too. And I found that the Wertheimers, because I thought, okay, she died at 87 in 1971, but she didn't have any children. So who did she leave, this empire to? The Wertheimers took it over the House of Chanel on an acquisition when she died. I thought that was interesting. In 1971, and then in 1983, Karl Lagerfeld, the designer, became the face of the Chanel, and he just passed away this past February. And the two grandsons, the Wertheimers, they're now 70 and 67. They're worth $21 billion each. They own 3 vineyards in France, 1 in Napa Valley, and they breed horses. And in 2018, there were 20,000 employees, Chanel employees, in 310 stores. And the company was worth $9.6 billion. So they did okay with taking it over. So I thought that was kind of sad that her family, I mean,
That's a
maybe
very
there's more
interesting twist.
information, with her nephew or her other family, but that they're doing quite well for themselves.
All right, so the last question for book number 3 is, how did Coco Chanel revolutionize the fashion industry?
I love this question, and I think there were so many things. I think one of her biggest contributions, and at the time most shocking, was her getting rid of those. They had to be ungodly uncomfortable, the corsets, and inspiring women to just be women and wear beautiful, comfortable clothes. And I loved all the accessories. I had a lot of hats when I was younger, and I wish they'd bring them back because I just think they're so feminine and pretty. She made simplicity elegant with her short haircut and her clothing. She introduced trousers for women in the workplace after World War I started in 1914. Remember when she took boys' suits and pants and made trousers? She took the bags that were just with handles, and she decided to add long straps to them like she had seen in the service. And made your hands free, so I thought that was kind of a big deal. My personal favorite was she introduced soft jersey fabric for her garments, and that had been typically used for men's underwear. We both had discussed that.
Yes.
And I just started sewing garments about a year ago, and I love jersey fabric for that reason, because it's soft and it just got such a pretty drape, and it just feels so good against your skin. So, and then her final was her perfume, Chanel No. 5. It was the first man-made perfume using synthetic ingredients instead of essential oils. And I think everybody from a young girl up to someone in their 80s could use that perfume and make them feel pretty. It's just a classic. And you found a couple other ones too.
Yeah, so I went online to do a bit of research about things she came up with, and so I have like a short list that I wrote down. The little black dress, which we already talked about. Trousers for women, as you mentioned already, the introduction of jersey because it was traditionally used for men's underwear. The handbag that you mentioned, it was called, I think, the 2.55 handbag. Boucle collarless jackets, again, the Chanel No. 5 fragrance. the use of costume jewelry. So not everyone needed to have this
Oh, faux
expensive.
pearls. She said
right.
faux pearls, so they would be affordable for all women to wear them. That's
Sailor tops, the Chanel suit, and the Chanel two-tone pump. So basically a ballet flat. And today everyone,
they're
I think
so
everyone has
classic.
ballet flats. Yeah, so lots of things in that list that I just mentioned. I also wanted to briefly talk about one other thing. So I take pride in the fact that the So Sweetness family is the most supportive and kind group across the internet. And I know that will always continue due to the caliber of our members. So thank you for being the best of the best as far as how you interact with other people in the Facebook group and in the chats. Everyone is
Kind and supportive.
right, exactly. And I also think it is important to read about and be educated on difficult topics. While Coco Chanel had an amazing rags to riches story and she was pivotal in advancing women's fashion design and everyday attire, she also did a lot of terrible things as a person during World War II that the author in the book, as it is a work of historical fiction, but the author kind of made certain things pretty in order to sound more pleasing to the reader. So if you'd like to learn more about this topic that was not covered in the book, I included a link in the description so you can briefly learn a little bit more. Of course, there's other books and websites on the internet, but I just chose this particular one because I felt it kind of summarized what she was doing during World War II. Not, as I mentioned, terrible things, and the author didn't mention them in the book, so I just wanted to make sure that we covered it during the book club discussion. So with that in mind, since we have another book to get to, we're going to start talking about book number 4, which was The Gown by Jennifer Robson. And my apologies, we're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties. I think Danny said on YouTube. YouTube is down, so I apologize for that, but we decided to keep and go on ahead. I know everyone watching on Facebook is still getting this stream, and we're going to do our best to get a copy of the show up on YouTube after the show. Is that right, Danny? Yes. Okay, so of course, when you need it, technology is not working correctly, but at least we have YouTube tonight.
Facebook.
Sorry, at least we have Facebook, sorry. All right, so again, we're going to be talking about The Gown now. And the first question for that book was, why did Miss Dooley hire Anne to work as a palace embroiderer even though she had no work experience? So I actually wrote down a quote from the book. Because she knew nothing, there was nothing for her to unlearn. So no bad habits, no poor techniques. She could be trained from the get-go to do things correctly, which is important because unlearning things sometimes is much more difficult
so technical.
than,
And
yes.
I had pretty much the same answer. I thought it was amazing. She was only 14 years old.
Yeah.
And Miss Dooley wanted someone she could train the Hartnell way from the beginning versus having to retrain and change prior. So she kind of zoned in on, ooh, you don't know anything. I think you have potential. I can train you. And clearly she was right.
Right. Yes, definitely. What is your favorite quote from the book, Tamara? Which one was your favorite?
Mine was from a conversation between Miriam and Anne when Anne was offering Miriam her sketchbook paper and her colored pencils to bring her idea of her embroidered tapestries to life. Miriam didn't want to waste Anne's paper, and I know back then everything, it makes you feel like you have so much. Now when you see during the wartime how everything was so rationed, Anne said to her, it's not a waste if it's something you enjoy. And right away it just made me think of how we have a tendency to save things for a special time or for a rainy day or for something in the future. And it reminded me of our coveted fabric. And Sarah and I both are big fans of tulip pink. Maybe I'm not as much, but we don't even want to cut into it. We just want to enjoy it and pet it. And we really should just, Chula wants us to use it. So we should just use it and enjoy using it. So hopefully that will encourage everyone to, don't be afraid. It's just fabric.
That's true.
Just do it.
So my favorite quote from the book is something that Miss Dooley said to the embroiderers while they were all frantic over the deadline of finishing the gown in time for the wedding. Miss Dooley said, attend to the work in front of you and the rest will take care of itself. So I thought that was a really nice way to look at a really frantic and stressful situation. Just focus on, kind of like tunnel vision, just focus on the one task you're working on. And then, before long, you'll be hitting the other tasks that you need to. But don't get this crazy idea in your head of, oh my gosh, I have this to do, this, and this. Just focus.
And I think it was her way of trying to get their minds off of panicking to finish. If you put Tula on your skin,
Charlie said, if you put your Tula on your skin, Tamara, you can then cut the fabric.
That's awesome. My boyfriend said he thinks I need to get one of these too, and I don't know if I could be as brave as Sarah for 24 hours or however long
it was really
took.
painful, but
she told me how bad it was. Like, no, I think I'll just admire hers.
And Teresa says, great point, Tamara. Use the good china and wear your good jewelry. Use that fabric.
And lingerie and our china and all the pretty
whatever,
things
the good
we
stuff.
should use.
You have
Absolutely.
it, so use it. Yeah,
good
enjoy
point.
it.
Good point.
Why do you think that Anne and Miriam became friends? Do you think they had anything in common? So I think they really needed each other. Anne had lost Millie when Millie moved to Canada. And then Miriam had, of course, a gigantic hole to fill after losing her family and after a great suffering in the concentration camp. So I think Miriam really needed Anne, and they both had the shared skill of embroidery. So their friendship works because there's no competition. There's not one that's trying to be better, more liked, or more skilled than the other.
They respected and supported their skills and helped each other. And
kind of like everyone in the Facebook group. It's not a competition. We're just being supportive and kind and helpful.
And inspire each other. And I pretty much agreed. I think it was perfect timing for Miriam to show up when Anne really needed that flatmate or roommate when Millie left. They both had the common thread of going through significant hardships and losses of many family members with the war that forced them to be very self-reliant as women, and they seem to respect and encourage each other's talent and skills and not be jealous, but to admire and support each other to get better.
Yeah. Ellen says their embroidery and their aloneness. Yeah, exactly.
Can't imagine.
Yeah. The British royal family holds a special place in many people's thoughts even today. And I'm thinking back over the most recent royal wedding, how people were, I think they were getting up at like 6 a.m. or something to watch the wedding, or at least in the United States, getting up at 6 a.m. What was the public, in the gown, what was the public reaction to the wedding and to the princess's gown itself?
I think there's always been a fascination and obsession with royalty, but especially in England, to the people there. And I thought there was an underlying reference that someone had said in the book. I couldn't find it, but that the king had planned the princess's wedding to lift the country's spirits after the war, which I thought was really interesting. What better way than to have like a big happy event to focus on? Miriam didn't seem to really understand all the attention and everything because, she didn't grow up there. But she did seem to enjoy being part of making the gown and being able to go to the wedding. And I think it helped when she saw the masses. She's like, wow, this is really a big deal.
Big deal. Yep. A quote from the book that I wrote down, Anne said, the royal family had made sacrifices same as the rest of them. The princess deserved a proper wedding with a glorious gown. And Danny's going to put a photo up on the screen. This is actually Princess Elizabeth at her wedding, and then a side-by-side photo. There's the gown.
So beautiful.
And just looking at the train and envisioning all the work, all the hand embroidery in that train, and of course it's on the dress as well, but wow, it's just amazing.
All done by hand. And if you've ever sewed with any of those fabrics, wow, it's satin and tulle. It's not easy. Not easy at all. So they were very talented.
Let me see. Should Anne have revealed her past to her daughter and her granddaughter? So in my opinion, I think she, of course, I have, like you said, when we were talking before the show, we haven't been in that situation, but I think she could have used their support. I can imagine that she felt ashamed, but it was nothing to feel shameful about. She did nothing wrong. So that was my thoughts about that.
And remember when she went to see the doctor and her family doctor just up and down and yelled at her, and she and I thought, all I kept thinking of is it's sad that it has to be that way. It's like she got pregnant by herself.
Right.
That there's no accountability. for that. But I think this was a hard one for me to answer because I've never been in that kind of situation. But I don't blame her to want to put it behind her and not carry it with her through her whole life and not share the details of her pregnancy and how it happened, since I think it would have always reminded her, her daughter, her granddaughter as well. But she chose not to share it because she wanted to give them the best life she could. And
that makes sense.
I think that's what she wanted. That was her goal. And I don't think she had any other children. She never married. So her goal was to give her daughter the best life she could because she always wanted to be a mom. And I think she did.
Yeah, that's a hard one to answer. I feel like there's no right or wrong. I mean, I think the fact that there is no right or wrong
It really makes you think.
Yeah, it does. What were your thoughts about Heather's storyline while you were reading the book? And would you have gone to the same lengths to solve the mystery? What do you think?
I loved her name being Heather because I think she named her Heather after the heather that the Queen had given Anne, and then she brought it when she came to Canada. I liked her storyline. I think it kind of connected everything, and I loved how close she was with her grandmother. I know you are with yours, and I was with one of mine. Would I have gone to the same lengths to solve the mystery? I definitely would have done the same thing. I have no problem just jumping on a plane and going somewhere by myself. I would have needed the closure. I mean, I think it was a miracle that she got so much resolved in such one visit, and she met a love interest at the same time.
Right.
It's like, how wonderful
The
is
magic
that?
of fiction.
Yeah, exactly. Historical fiction. But I think it would have driven me crazy if I wouldn't have been able to figure out, all you have is that box with your name. It's like, okay, what do I do
Right.
with this? So, yeah.
So I thought Heather's storyline was interesting, and actually for a long time I couldn't figure out what's the connection between Heather and then
It took me a little while,
Anne and
too.
Miriam. I was waiting and waiting and waiting to see how it would turn out. Honestly, I think it was a great adventure to figure out the mystery, and then even if she had not figured it out, it was still a great memory to have, like going, trying to figure things out and
Well, you
step by step.
didn't know who she was talking about because she just kept saying her or her grandmother, and you're like, okay, who's her grandmother? And you want to
Right.
think you know who it is until it starts. Oh, okay.
Yes, exactly.
And then it made you sad because then she died.
Right. How did Miriam seem different at the end of the book compared to what she was like when she first got a job as a palace embroiderer? So I think embroidery brought back Miriam's confidence in herself in general. She seemed sort of small and unsure at the beginning of the book and seemed to have taken ownership of her life, at least when we see her at the museum gallery opening.
Yeah, I think her life experience and then also marrying someone who understood her, who supported her, where she was able to honor her family and Anne and the embroidered tapestries. They just sounded beautiful, almost like a thread painting or art kind of quilts. I wish you would have seen some kind of pictures to try to imagine, but they were pretty well descriptive,
Right.
The colors and what she had. So yeah, I thought they just sounded beautiful.
All right, so last question for the gown. Miriam continued her embroidery by creating works of art to commemorate her family and her life. How does handwork, including sewing and quilting, stand the test of time? What do you think about that?
I think it does, and it will continue. In many different cultures, anything from wedding gowns and quilts, there's always going to be hand sewing involved, and it'll always have a place in history and inspire. And clothing styles always come back around.
Right.
And think about like when Lady Di got married in the 80s, and I was one of the people. I got married in the 80s with the big poofy sleeves, and they're very iconic for times. And the same thing with quilting and sewing. Any kind of fashion, bags, all of it
That's
seems
true.
to come back around. But there's always going to be an element of hand embroidery, and in many countries that's all they do is hand embroidery.
Right, that's true. I think it's definitely a legacy. So many quilts especially show family heritage and how people lived. And if we're thinking back to the book discussion we did about The
I
Last
thought about
Runaway,
that with
how the signature
With the
quilts
slaves
were
and the
a
signature
record
quilts.
of the family tree in some families. So I think it always be around and it will always be important. Sandra says, I wondered if Heather went back and told her mother about her mom's life or kept it to herself in respect to her nan. Yeah, that's right. They
They
didn't
did
discuss-
kind of. was not a lot of closure. It just kind of left a lot open, I thought. I'm sure to just think it's a big happy ending. Everybody met someone and there's closure and you figured it all out. But I wondered that as well.
And, so again, I apologize to the folks that normally watch on YouTube. Just technical difficulties from YouTube today, but I'm glad we got through on Facebook. So a few more things. Before I forget, I have a few things written down here. I have a link in the description. Sign-ups for the So Sweetness swap are open until June 21st, so you can read the full details in the link that I posted in the description. But just a quick summary of what the swap is like. So it will be, you'll be sewing, if you decide to participate, you'll be sewing a So Sweetness pouch and sending 4 fat quarters to your partner.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, so it's kind of a night. You can either send fat quarters from your stash, or it's a fun thing. You can go out and purchase half yards and cut it in half and keep one of the fat quarters for yourself and send one off. So again, that's linked to in the description. Before we show off the project video and pattern to go along with this week's book club discussion, let us know if you're a bag lady or a bag dude. It's been a while since we asked this, but definitely like seeing the wall of bag lady and bag dudes come through on the screen. And again, thanks for joining us back on the live shows. Again,
it's so good to have you back, darling.
I'm super happy to be back. And based on a couple emails that I got, 1 or 2 people said, I can tell this is really what you're supposed to be doing because you seem excited to be back. And
just
even even going through a break, I still want to do this, and I have great ideas. Of course, I have to kind of censor myself a little and keep the great ideas under control so that they're a manageable amount of great ideas. But definitely excited to be back. So if you pass me those 2 little pouches right there.
They're beautiful.
This is the free project to go along with the book. I thought the lace zipper box pouch was really appropriate. So this is a box pouch, but as you can see, it's got a lace zipper, and the lace zipper is just top stitched in place. I've always wanted to make a project with a lace zipper, but
it's been
never got around to it.
It's not hard,
No,
is it?
It's super easy.
It's actually easier than a regular zipper.
They come in different colors. I actually found these on Etsy, but of course your local sewing or quilt shop might have these in stock already. And I found some in fun colors like blue, green, and red. I just thought it was something really nice, and it kind of reminded me of, especially in the gown, just the lace zipper kind of reminded me of that whole, I don't know, time
really
period
loved
or
that
the
book. That was a
projects.
good
Yeah,
choice.
that was a really great book. So after the show, just give me a few minutes and I have everything in draft and ready to go, but I'll be posting the free video and the free PDF pattern for this project. It's a really quick project, and it's fat quarter friendly as well, which is always nice.
Can you see the inside?
Oh, sure. I actually because I'm a lazy sewist, I actually just top stitched my lining closed, but if you like a really nice lining, you can slip stitch that by hand, and it's just
it's really pretty.
Yeah, it's just a really nice looking box pouch. As you can see, it fits pencils.
It's a great size. Not
scissors,
too big, not too small.
Yeah. And it's got a handle on the front as well. So again, I called this the Windsor pouch. I'll be posting that a few minutes after the live stream ends. What else did I write on the list to tell you? Oh, so for next month, our book club discussion will be on July 23rd, I think is the date. The full schedule is linked to in the description on the main book club page. Danny's going to put a photo on the screen right now of our book number 5 selection. So the reason that there's 2 different cover artworks with titles here is because depending on where you live, this book might be called a different title. So I believe in the United States, possibly also in Canada, the book is called The Hidden Thread. The author is Liz Traynau. Other parts of the world, especially if you're looking for this book at your local library or an Audible book, the title might be different. You might be finding the book come up as The Silk Weaver. So this is both the same book, not two separate books, but again, just depending on what
So
part
maybe
of the
look
world.
at the author first.
Right, look for the author first, and then you either want the Hidden Thread or the Silk Weaver. I guess they just really wanted to make it super confusing for people. I saw reviews on Amazon for both of these books, and there were several people who had purchased both copies thinking they were different books, and they were actually the same book. So, yeah, I wanted to have both of those graphics on the screen just so there's no confusion, or at least as little confusion as possible. And I also wanted to give you a heads up on next month's project. I usually try not to reveal things ahead of time, but this had a piece of specialized purse hardware, and so next month I'm going to be using this bit of purse hardware for next month's book club project. So these are coin purse frames, size large. I have them on my website. It's linked to in the description, but I know some people like to have their supplies ahead of time. For the box pouch, that was relatively easy because just fat quarters and interfacing, as well as the zipper. But in case you wanted to get your supplies ahead of time, this is linked to in the description. And of course, if you'd rather just wait to see the project first, that's okay too. But I just wanted to give everyone the options. So that concludes our book club discussion for books number 3 and 4.
In 45 minutes.
Yeah, wow. I guess it didn't feel like we were rushing, but I guess we were. We always talk about the questions before the show. So we have dinner together, and then we talk about the questions. And so I guess we were just really like in sync and in tune to what was going on. But I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. Like I mentioned,
Love the books.
Yeah, the books were excellent. I know you'll like book number 5 as well. And thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next month, and look for the free video and PDF pattern of the Windsor pouch. Have a great week, everyone, and
everybody.
happy sewing. Bye, everybody.